I said at the start that we were very lucky to have two chief planners in this episode, and Hwang Yu-Ning joined us on the line from the Urban Redevelopment Authority in Singapore. You may know that Singapore is a city-state at the end of the Malay Peninsula, which is 300 times smaller than the UK and half the size of London. And yet Singapore is one of Southeast Asia's most significant cities, and it has a fascinating story to tell when it comes to urban planning. Here's Yu-Ning speaking to Greg.
I'm delighted to be joined today by Yu-Ning Hwang, who's the Chief Planner of Singapore and the Deputy Chief Executive of the URA in Singapore. Yu-Ning, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about how COVID-19 has been playing out in Singapore and what this means for land uses, and this idea that's around about a kind of new agility in terms of how land and building works.
Well, Greg, thanks for having me. So given Singapore's unique circumstances, planning for sustainability is of particular importance to us. And in trying to balance all these different requirements, we try to plan ahead for Singapore's land uses in a systematic way. And we regularly review our plans to make adjustments to ensure that the plans stay relevant and cater to the changing needs of our residents. Now, with COVID-19, like many other cities, Singapore has seen shifts in activity patterns across a whole range of different sectors. During our circuit breaker period, which is basically a stay-at-home order and cordon sanitaire implemented by the government for around 8 weeks, we saw ridership from the period before the outbreak drop by 75% for public buses, around 84% for public transit. I guess the real challenge is trying to discern what are the long-term urban planning related implications. Will these trends be sustained? With more people working from home, it shows the need for the CBD to have more mixed uses and with more live-in population, because during the circuit breaker period, we certainly saw a very, very quiet CBD. Some of the master plan moves that we've made in the past are aimed at transforming the CBD into a vibrant mixed-use neighborhood instead of a more kind of monocentric, office-centric district. So in some sense, the moves that we've made are well placed to accommodate some of these changing trends. And at the same time, with more people working from home and doing all their daily activities in and around the home, it does show a need to strengthen the convenience and accessibility of our neighborhoods. I think, Greg, you've been to Singapore and you've seen that many of our existing neighborhoods are already fairly well planned in terms of having local amenities around them, whether it's recreation or your day-to-day grocery shopping. But there are certainly gaps, and I think that we may need to plan for more capacity, as we've seen during the circuit breaker when everybody is trying to use some of these facilities like your parks and all that. So many of these changing trends, whether it's working from home, whether it's this need to have more facilities in and around the home, these are nascent trends that we were already seeing before COVID-19, but COVID-19 has really accelerated their adoption. So what remains to be seen is whether these trends will be sustained. And I suppose the big question for planning is what will the new normal be? And how can we adjust our plans so that we are supporting the new normal?
Yu-Ning, thank you very much indeed. There's so much in what you said. Essentially, COVID-19 is an accelerator of emergent trends, and you're looking forward to having greater mixed use, more vibrant CBDs, more people living in the downtown, but also residential neighborhoods with greater amenities, more opportunities for people who work from home to enjoy a quality of neighborhood life. And as you say, some key questions about what this means for planning in the future. So as you look forward, what do you think the planning system of the future will be? How will it evolve, especially in Singapore? But I know that you travel widely, so if you have a broader set of ideas here, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I think for planning, fundamentally, the purpose of planning will remain, while the issues that we address will likely evolve. So we will continue to innovate the art and science of how we plan and the tools that we use, hopefully to provide more evidence-based planning so that we can see from the activity patterns, the data, what it's trying to tell us. and how can we make use of it to make more informed planning decisions, and use that as well to engage the stakeholders and the community so that we are sharing the insights and making plans ahead together. So I believe the pace of change will likely be faster. Cities are also increasingly becoming more complex with more uncertainties. We need to be able to harness the insights, whether it's from the data or whether it's through deeper engagement with the community, to better help us shape and create the future that we want. So I do see a future of planning where the fundamentals of planning are not being changed, but the tools that are supporting us in the way we plan are being enhanced.
Again, a lot in what you say, and this combination of more tools but more engagement. Can we talk a little bit about one set of those tools, which are essentially digital technologies and the emergence of real-time new forms of data? How do you see this digitization of planning emerging, and what does it provide to a chief planner like yourself?
I think the digitalization of planning, or I think in UK you also call it plan tech, is part of a continuous series of innovations. Ultimately, when we plan, we are really trying to create a better future for people, to create or to support a home that's endearing and lovable, a city that's safe, where people can live comfortably and work together as a community. So we should not lose sight of these as we harness the use of the data and technology in the way we plan. In fact, the outcomes should serve as a guiding post in that sense for efforts. So I remember that reading this book, The Smart Enough City, I thought something that struck me from there is ultimately the fundamental question is not how we can make civic life more efficient with technology, but rather how can we use technology to make civic life more meaningful. So that should be the way that we approach digitalization and planning.
Yu-Ning, that's absolutely fascinating that in a sense you're focusing not on digitization as an outcome in itself, but digitization as a tool for better life, better cities, better experience for citizens. What does this mean for the skills of the planner in the future? You know, in the past, planners typically had degrees in geography and learned about zoning and, of course, learned about how to construct amazing written plans. But what will the planner in the future do, and what skills will they need?
Greg, we talked about agility, and I think our planner of the future really needs to have this quality of agility. Agility in being able to grasp unfolding trends and emerging situations, being able to have the agility to engage the stakeholders and understand what the stakeholders are trying to tell us, and be able to pick up new skills and tools along the way to do what we talk about more evidence-based planning. The fundamentals of planners' role in this is really to try and synthesize a lot of these insights and then share possible visions of what the future could look like in consultation and discussion with the stakeholders. And ultimately, as we move towards more tools, hopefully it will free up our planners to do more of that engagement and understanding what's happening on the ground and being able to pick up some of that weak signals that are coming through and start to think ahead of time what this would mean for planning and for the communities they are planning for.
So in an interesting way, having more technological tools actually makes planners more creative in the work that they have to do.
We certainly hope so. We hope our planners of the future are able to rely on the technologies, whether it is your urban planning systems, your artificial intelligence, to do some of what I would call the grunt work of planning. Whether it's trying to look through the files and see what happened in the past, or gather a lot of the data that currently we may be doing it a little bit more manually, and future we would have the technology, the sensors, the data to help us do some of that work. But the work of trying to mash the planning, the art and the science of planning still has to come from the planner. So we hope the technology would free up our planners to have more time to do that, and of course, to talk to the stakeholders.
That's wonderful. And I can imagine this is going to attract a lot more talented young people to want to be planners. Of course, Singapore has the reputation for being perhaps the best planned city in the whole world. It's the city that has planned its evolution through many cycles of strategic planning from 1964 all the way through to 2020. And in a sense, it's taught the world how to do strategic planning. Is there going to be more cycles of this kind of strategic planning in Singapore, or will you be moving to a system that in a sense is more organic, in a certain way less planned?
Well, Greg, you're certainly familiar with the story of Singapore, and we didn't invent strategic planning. We learned a lot of it through the help of the United Nations Development Program, and that really helped us set the tone. But I do see the framework for planning, our planning approach, as really, in a way, an approach for us to come together with different agency partners, with different collaborators, with the stakeholders, to regularly work together on the issues and think about the needs as they emerge. So I see it more as a process than having the plan as an end product. So even as we look to the new age of trying to be more agile and responsive in the planning, I think this regular review, this regularly coming together, helps us a lot in trying to develop, in a way, and anticipate the thinking. If I could use the maxim that George Box puts forth, that all models are wrong, but some models are useful, I would like to say a bit tongue-in-cheek that all plans are wrong, but some plans are useful. So the exercise of trying to develop the plans help us unfold the issues that are emerging, look at some of the underlying assumptions. Are those assumptions still relevant? Think about how we might respond to some of these unfolding needs and new trends. So the planning as an approach is the importance, and not just the plan as an outcome. And as we go forward, I will imagine that we will continue to need temporary and flexible planning as well as spaces to meet unexpected needs. So just like in the UK with your Nightingale hospitals, we have converted major meeting and convention venues into temporary care facilities for recovering COVID-19 cases. So as we go forward, I imagine we will continue to need to plan for such buffers in our urban fabric to enable rapid responses. As to what specifically those needs are, we will know about them as they unfold, but the regularly coming together helps us understand potentially what are some of these concerns, underlying concerns might be, and when the need arises, we are able to work fast because we know who the stakeholders are, we know who our collaborators are, we know some of the potential concerns that there may be, so that we can respond more quickly.
Yu-Ning, it's always a great pleasure to speak to you. I'm so honored to have a few minutes with you. Thank you very, very much.
It's always a delight to speak with you, Greg. Thank you. Thanks for having me.